The boy wasn't speeding. He wasn't swerving, shouting, or doing tricks. He was just riding his bike upright, cautious, both hands on the handlebars. A canvas messenger bag bounced lightly against his hip with each turn of the pedal. His tie was crooked, his shoes mismatched, but his posture was steady. Then the siren chirped. Just once. Enough to make him stop. "Off the bike," the officer barked. Malik Harris froze. He was 16. 5 minutes ago, he'd left his grandmother's porch with a smile and a firm hug. 5 minutes from now, he was supposed to board a bus headed to the state capitol where he was scheduled to speak at the Southeastern Youth Human Rights Summit. But right now, he stood on the sidewalk, 1 foot still on the pedal. "Where you headed?" "Bus depot," Malik answered, voice calm. "Downtown." "You got ID?" Malik reached into his bag slowly, carefully, and handed over a school-issued card and a printed event badge. The officer didn't even glance at them. "What's in the bag?" "Just my notebook and my speech." "Speech, huh?" the second officer said, stepping out of the cruiser. "What kind of speech?" Malik hesitated. "On the history of youth-led civil rights action." That made the first officer laugh. "You mean protesting? You one of those kids trying to tell cops how to do their job?" "No, sir," Malik replied. "Just trying to remind people what their rights are." "That so?" The officer stepped closer. His sunglasses reflected Malik's face calm, unblinking. "Got any weapons?" "No, sir." "Drugs?" "Number. Mind if I search the bag?" "Yes, sir," Malik answered. "I do mind. And unless you have probable cause." The second officer cut him off. "Look at that. Kid's been watching YouTube lawyers." Malik opened his mouth, then paused. And then, without raising his voice, he began to speak. "The most dangerous thing a young black man can carry is not a gun, not a knife, not even a backpack. It's knowledge of the law." The street went quiet. Even the wind held its breath. Because the moment we speak in clauses and amendments, suddenly we're resisting. We're acting suspicious. We're being difficult. He pulled a folded paper from his pocket and read, "Let it be known that when injustice becomes law, resistance becomes duty." That was Jefferson. And before you call that aggressive, ask yourselves, what are we taught to recite in school? The pledge or the truth? A teenager, standing on cracked pavement, quoting Revolution in a whisper. The officers didn't know what to do. But across the street, someone did. A woman sitting at the bus stop had raised her phone quietly, steadily. She hit record. Because this wasn't just a stop and frisk. It was about to become a moment. Malik Harris didn't grow up with much. Not money, not a last name that opened doors, not the kind of zip code where people assumed the best of you. But what he did grow up with was attention. He paid attention to everything. The way his grandmother read the newspaper out loud, circling words she wanted him to learn. The way teachers paused when taking roll, stumbling over his name before glancing up for confirmation. The way police cruisers slowed down when he walked home from school, especially if he was wearing a hoodie or laughing too loudly with friends. Malik noticed things other kids ignored. And eventually, he started writing them down. In a spiral notebook with a broken spine, he kept a growing list titled, "Questions America Doesn't Like Answering." Question number 12. Why is walking fast suspicious, but standing still is loitering? Question number 19. Why are we told to trust authority, but not taught how to hold it accountable? Question number 27. Why is anger called dangerous when it comes from the people with the least power? He wrote them between algebra problems, between part-time shifts at the corner store, between heating dinner for his grandmother who raised him since he was 6 after his mother passed and his father disappeared. They didn't talk about tragedy in that house. They talked about endurance. And even though Malik had every reason to stay quiet, he didn't. At 13, he entered a county-wide speech contest, speaking about the dangers of over-policing school campuses. At 14, he organized a student walkout after a fellow classmate was suspended, for wearing a "Silence is Violence" t-shirt. At 15, he delivered a 5-minute testimony before the city council about the lack of after-school programs in black neighborhoods. And won. They reinstated funding the next week. Malik didn't brag. He didn't even post about it. Change doesn't need a selfie, he once told a friend. It just needs to stick. But people started to notice. A local nonprofit, a civil rights group in Atlanta. Then, one day, an email arrived from the Southeastern Youth Human Rights Summit tasking Malik to deliver the opening address. He printed the message 3 times. One for himself, one for his grandmother, and one to keep folded in his pocket, proof maybe that his voice did matter. The event wasn't until Saturday, but he wanted to be early. He didn't trust the bus system, or morning traffic, or the odds. So he packed his bag the night before. 1 printed speech, 1 notebook full of notes, a second-hand tie from Goodwill, a pair of scuffed shoes wiped clean, and a quiet belief that if he just showed up, he could say something that stuck. His grandmother rose early that morning, made him grits and eggs, and gave him 2 things before he left. A firm hug and a soft warning. "Watch how they look at you, baby," she said. "Sometimes the most dangerous thing you can carry is dignity." Malik smiled, nodded, and tucked the speech inside his bag. He left the house at 7:02 a.m. By 7:11, he was being questioned by 2 officers. And by 7:13, he was quoting Thomas Jefferson. Not because he wanted to sound smart, but because he knew exactly what kind of America he was riding through. "Let me see that again," the taller officer said, holding Malik's ID between 2 fingers like it was something sticky. He turned it over, looked at the back, then at Malik's face, then back at the ID again. "This doesn't even have a barcode." "It's from my school," Malik replied. "Public Magnet Program. The event badge is in the same sleeve." The officer handed it to his partner. "You ever seen one of these?" The second officer shrugged. "Could be fake. Photoshop's free." "It's not fake," Malik said calmly. "We'll decide that." "What's your name again?" "Malik Harris." "Spell it." "Malikharis." "And where are you headed?" "To the bus depot downtown." "For what again?" "A human rights summit. I'm a speaker." That made the first officer laugh again. "You, a speaker?" Malik nodded. "At 16? "Yes." "What are you speaking about exactly?" "Youth-led civil action. Historical patterns in policing. The gap between legislation and lived experience." "The what now?" "Lived experience." "Yeah," the officer said, smirking. "I think you're about to get one of those." He opened Malik's bag without asking. Malik stepped forward slightly. "Sir, I don't consent to that search." "You don't need to," the officer snapped. "You're a minor. No guardian present." "That's not true," Malik answered. "The Supreme Court ruled in JDB v. North Carolina that minors still have protections under the 4th and 5th Amendments during encounters with law enforcement." The second officer paused. "You memorized case law?" "I study it," Malik said. "It helps me understand what's being ignored." "You trying to be a lawyer?" "Trying to be heard." The officer rifled through the bag. He pulled out a notebook, flipped it open. Pages and pages of notes. Quotes from civil rights leaders, constitutional excerpts, hand-drawn graphs. "What is this, homework?" "No," Malik said. "It's preparation." "For what?" "For the day someone like you asked me the wrong question." The first officer straightened. "You think you're clever?" "No," Malik said. "I think I'm ready." The air between them thickened. A bystander across the street stopped walking. Then another. Phones were now visible. Held low, not raised but pointed. "You always this mouthy?" "Only when I'm nervous," Malik replied. "And when I'm nervous, I remember things." "Like what?" Malik took a deep breath. "Like what Rosa Parks said, you must never be fearful about what you are doing when it is right." The officers looked at each other. "Is that supposed to scare us?" "No," Malik said. It's supposed to remind you. The officer slammed the notebook shut. You're getting close to obstruction, son. No, sir. I'm standing still, on public property, speaking calmly. That's not obstruction. That's presence. You're not going anywhere until we verify this story. Malik nodded. Then I'll wait. But while I do, may I read something? You're kidding, right? Malik unfolded a page from his pocket. 2 minutes, he said. No louder than my normal voice. Fine, the taller officer scoffed. Let's hear your little speech. Malik looked down, then up. His voice stayed steady. There is no power greater than a child who knows the world isn't what it promised to be and decides to speak anyway. The crowd that had started to gather didn't cheer, didn't move. They just listened. Because something was shifting, and it wasn't just a routine stop anymore. The officer stared at Malik like he was trying to decide what was more Dangerushi's words or his calm. Read that again? Malik didn't flinch. There is no power greater than a child who knows the world isn't what it promised to be and decides to speak anyway. That from your notebook? No, sir, that one's mine. A hush settled over the sidewalk. Malik glanced at the notebook the officer still held. May I have that back? The officer hesitated, then shoved it into Malik's hands. You got a problem with authority? Malik looked up. I have a problem with how authority defines itself. You think you're some kind of revolutionary? No, Malik said. Just observant. You keep going like this, we'll bring you in. Obstruction. Disorderly conduct. Conduct requires action, Malik replied. So far, I've only used my voice. The officer stepped forward. Son, I don't think you understand. Oh, I understand perfectly, Malik interrupted gently. You're looking at me and not seeing who I am. You're seeing what you fear I might be. You're twisting words now. No, Malik said. I'm restoring context. The second officer, still silent until now, cleared his throat. Let's run his name. Malik Harris, right? Correct. Spell it again. Malik Harris. The officer walked back to the cruiser and started typing into the onboard terminal. Malik turned to the growing group behind the yellow bus stop sign. A teenage girl in a school hoodie gave him a thumbs up. A man in a construction vest nodded solemnly. A grandmotherly figure wiped under her eyes. Malik's heart was pounding now, but his face remained composed. The first officer circled him again. So, let's say all this checks out, he muttered. You're some youth speaker, smart kid. What do you get out of this little scene? Hopefully, Malik said, an honest conversation, not just for you and me, but for everyone watching. You trying to go viral? Malik shook his head. I'm trying to go to my bus. The officer stopped in front of him. You think talking like this protects you? Malik didn't smile. But it protects someone after me. You're real confident for someone wearing second-hand shoes. And you're real defensive for someone with a badge. The crowd let out a soft gasp. Not loud, not mocking, just stunned. The second officer returned, eyes on the screen. Sir, we've got a hit. What kind? He's on the speaker list. Human Rights Summit. Front page. The first officer frowned. That's real? Yeah. And not just real, he's headlining the youth session. There's a video too, his 2022 speech from Atlanta. 2.3 million views. The first officer glanced at Malik, then back at the crowd, who were now fully recording. Malik didn't move. May I go now? He asked. The officer's jaw tightened. Where's your bus again? 7 blocks down. Depot by North and 5th. You gonna cause a scene there too? Malik took a deep breath. No, sir. I plan to cause silence. What? The kind that happens when a room hears truth and doesn't know how to respond. The first officer exhaled sharply and turned away. The second one, younger, softer spoken, lingered. Malik? Yes, sir? Can I ask something? Go ahead. Do you want people to hate cops? Malik shook his head slowly. Number. I want people to challenge power. If that makes power uncomfortable, maybe that says more about power than it does about people. The younger officer nodded once, then stepped back. Malik adjusted the strap on his shoulder, and for the first time since the stop began, took a full breath. Behind him, the woman at the bus stop whispered to her phone's camera. He didn't just talk like a leader. He stood like one. The crowd around Malik had doubled. Not from shouting, not from spectacle, just from presence. People had stopped, people had stayed. They didn't know why at first, just that something felt different, like they were watching a scene they weren't supposed to miss. The younger officer nodded once, then stepped back. Malik adjusted the strap on his shoulder, and for the first time since the stop began, took a full breath. Behind him, the woman at the bus stop whispered to her phone's camera. He didn't just talk like a leader. He stood like one. The crowd around Malik had doubled. Not from shouting, not from spectacle, just from presence. People had stopped, people had stayed. They didn't know why at first, just that something felt different, like they were watching a scene they weren't supposed to miss. The officers hadn't moved. The first one crossed his arms tighter. The second was staring at the screen in the squad car, reading headlines that made it very, very clear. They thought they stopped a kid, but they had stopped a symbol in sneakers, carrying a truth too heavy to silence. A black teenager with a backpack, a voice, and a growing national profile. And they had tried to silence him, on camera. Someone in the crowd finally said it out loud. "That's Malik Harris." Murmurs followed. And just like that, the dynamic shifted. The crowd wasn't just watching anymore. They were bearing witness. The first officer turned back to Malik, his jaw tight. "So what, you're famous now?" Malik tilted his head. "No, sir. Just familiar to people who listen." "You think this changes anything?" Malik looked at the phones, the faces, the rising quiet around them. "I think it already did." The second officer took a step forward. "Mr. Harris, I didn't realize who you were." Malik met his eyes. "That's the problem," he said. "You shouldn't have to realize who someone is to treat them like they matter." The younger officer's face faltered. "You're right." Someone in the crowd shouted, "Let him go." Another voice, "He wasn't doing anything wrong." The woman in the business suit stepped out. "I'm a civil rights attorney," she said, "and I strongly suggest you end this interaction now before you create something the city will pay for." The taller officer looked ready to push back, but the second one laid a hand on his arm. "Let it go," he said quietly. "It's done." The first officer clenched his jaw, then turned to Malik. "You're free to go." Malik didn't nod, didn't thank him. He just adjusted the strap on his shoulder and took a step forward. But then, he stopped, turned, and pulled a folded paper from his pocket. "Since I still have 3 minutes before my bus," he said softly, "may I finish what I planned to say?" The officers didn't answer, but the crowd did. They stepped back to give him space. The sidewalk became a stage, and Malik began. No mic, no podium, just a voice. "There are 2 ways to lead," he said. "You can speak loud enough to be heard, or you can speak clearly enough to be understood. We've had loud, now it's time for clarity. This world doesn't need more uniforms with unchecked power. It needs more youth with unshaken purpose." His voice didn't rise, but it carried. Over phones, over doubt, over fear. This stop didn't break me. It revealed you. So the next time you see a kid on a bike, ask yourself first, what story are you assuming? And what truth might you be ignoring? He folded the paper. A single clap came from somewhere deep in the group. Then another. Then all of them. Not because he was famous, but because finally, someone had said what everyone else was too scared to say. Officer Ramirez hadn't said much that morning. He wasn't new to the job, but he was new to this district. He'd transferred just 2 weeks earlier after asking for a less confrontational beat. Less tension, less pressure, less noise. But as he stood there, next to his partner, watching Malik fold that speech and return it gently to his bag. He realized the noise didn't come from the streets. It came from what people carried. Voices, pain, history, assumptions. And silence, especially the kind people used to survive, was often louder than any protest chant. "Hey, Ramirez," his partner muttered under his breath. "Let's go. We're done." But Ramirez didn't move right away. He was watching the boy. Watching the way Malik held his shoulders, not defiant, not boastful, just grounded. It reminded him of his own younger brother. Smart kid, quiet, wrote poetry he never let anyone read. Until one day he stopped writing altogether after being handcuffed outside a store for looking suspicious. Ramirez had been angry about that. Furious, even. But now, he wondered, had he become the very thing that made his brother fall silent? Malik turned slightly, as if sensing the hesitation. Their eyes met, not long, not dramatic, but enough. Ramirez stepped forward. "Malik." The boy looked at him. "Yes, sir? Can I ask you something?" "You already did," Malik replied gently. "Earlier, when you asked if I was carrying anything illegal." "I know," Ramirez said, "but this time, I'd like to ask something real." Malik nodded once. "Go ahead. Do you think people like me can change?" The sidewalk fell quiet again. Even the wind seemed to stop moving. Malik didn't rush his answer. He let it come slow, like something earned. "Only if you stop confusing silence for safety," he said. Ramirez blinked. "What does that mean?" "It means change isn't about the words you don't say," Malik explained. "It's about the voices you choose to listen to." Ramirez took a step back, thoughtful. For once, he didn't look like a man in uniform. He just looked human. He turned to his partner. "You go ahead, I'll catch up." The other officer raised an eyebrow, but walked off. Ramirez looked back at Malik. "I won't pretend to understand everything you said." "You don't have to," Malik said. "You just have to sit with it." "Sit with it?" "Let it make you uncomfortable." "And if it does?" Malik gave a half smile. "Then maybe that's where the change begins." Ramirez nodded, slowly, then turned and walked, not away from Malik, but towards something quieter inside himself, that he hadn't listened to in years. Malik made it to the bus station with 4 minutes to spare. He bought his ticket in cash, Saturday near the back, opened his notebook, and for the first time in hours, let himself breathe. The engine hummed to life. The city blurred past the window. He didn't post online. He didn't call anyone. He just sat, quiet. Because sometimes, even those who carry the most truth need space to carry their exhaustion too. Across town, a phone buzzed on a desk inside the precinct. Officer Ramirez picked it up. It was a message from his younger brother. Just one line. "That kid, Malik? He's the one I used to write about." At that same moment, inside a small living room lit by sunlight and framed photos, Malik's grandmother sat beside a stack of folded laundry. The television played softly. A local station cut in. "Breaking this afternoon, a video of a police stop involving youth speaker Malik Harris is gaining attention online. The teen, scheduled to speak at a human rights summit, was detained on his way to the bus depot." But what happened next is what's resonating across the country. She leaned forward. The clip played grainy phone footage. Malik standing still, quoting the Constitution, quoting himself, never raising his voice, but somehow commanding every soul within earshot. Her eyes welled. She didn't cry, but she did whisper something only she and the silence could hear. "I told you, baby. Your words got weight." By evening, the story had reached national media. By morning, the school principal had sent out a message district-wide, praising Malik's composure. By Friday, his name trended alongside phrases like, "Number the quiet leader," "Number let Malik speak," and "Number youth with power." But Malik didn't log in. didn't refresh. He didn't need likes to confirm what he already knew. That dignity, when held under pressure, becomes a kind of gravity. And when one voice stands still against a wave of assumption, sometimes the whole current shifts. He delivered his speech that Saturday. Not with anger, not with ego, but with the quiet certainty of someone who had already lived the truth he came to speak. Afterward, a girl from another city approached him. She held out a copy of his speech with highlights and margin notes. "I'm going to use this," she said, "for my school board testimony next month." Malik smiled. "Then I guess I did my job." She paused. "How did you stay so calm when they stopped you?" He thought for a second, then answered, "Because I knew they didn't stop me. They stopped an idea. And ideas don't scare when they're true." She nodded, and Malik walked away. Not as a victim, not even as a hero, but as a reminder. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is keep moving forward when the world tries to stop you, just to see what you'll become. Malik didn't carry a weapon. He carried a notebook. He didn't speak loud, he didn't shout, but somehow every word shook the silence. He raised a standard. He didn't try to win an argument. He reminded the room what was worth defending. This wasn't a story about a viral video or a brilliant kid outsmarting the system. It was about what happens when a young person chooses clarity over fear and conviction over silence. And what happens when the world is forced to stop and realize it almost missed a leader because he was wearing a backpack instead of a badge. If this story made you pause, even for a breath, then share it. Share it for every student who's been dismissed before they've spoken. For every teenager told, "You're too young to understand." And for every voice that refused to wait for permission. At Hidden Justice, we don't chase viral stories. We reveal the ones that matter, but were never told. If you believe those stories deserve a home, subscribe. Not for us, but for the ones still riding toward their truth. So, if you're still listening, maybe the journey toward change already started with you.